Hello, and thank you for joining us today on this Making Flexible Working webinar. Today, this webinar is brought to you proudly by the Flexagility Group and Advancing Women in Business and Sport. My name is Vanessa van der Hoek and I'm the founder of Flexible Working Day, and it is my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to Michelle Redfern, who has made it her life passion to advance women in business and sport. She's moving gender diversity quite authentically from conversation to action. And we've got some amazing examples. She's changing history just this last weekend, and we'll share that story in a minute. Michelle has had a very successful career as an executive in some very well-known brands to all of us, and a board member, and for the last couple of years she's made great strides in helping advance women in what she says, get stuff done, which I love that. Michelle, thank you for joining us today on Flexible Working Day.
My pleasure. It's very, very good to be here. And yes, GSD is my motto, get stuff done. And in less polite company, I use the other S word. But anyway, we won't go there today.
Now, Michelle, you've joined us as an ambassador this year. Congratulations and thank you. Why did you choose to support Flexible Working Day?
Number one, because you asked me, and I think when you ask, you get. So that's always a good start. And the second one is because I truly believe and have always believed in flexible work. And whilst the terminology flex work or flexible work has become ubiquitous in the last few years, and organisations are seeing it as a great way to enhance workplace engagement and productivity, it's always been the key for me as a working parent, full-time working parent, to have some degree of flexibility in my work practices. And I know that when I'm working flexibly, which I do all the time now, when I'm working flexibly, I can work at times when I'm at my best, in places when I'm at my best, and can produce really great work. But importantly, I can also produce work that's based on good, deep thinking, critical thinking, rather than task output based on kind of just running on the hamster wheel. So that's a very long answer to a short question, but I think flex work is the key to success for any workplace that wants to make its workplace work for its workers.
Absolutely. And when we spoke a little while ago, we spoke about how flexible work looks so different for everybody, and there's not one type of flexible work that potentially suits every individual. And you and I were talking and sharing stories and reflecting over our careers, how it's not part-time work all the time, and it's not working in a cafe or from home all the time. It's many different things. It's having career breaks, like you said, parental leave, it's starting late, working, early, finishing early, all these different permutations. I suppose, what are your tips for people this flexible working day on how to really stop and work through what's going to work best for them?
I think your first piece of that question is to stop and think, and to stop and think about when am I at my best, and where am I at my best. And certainly in the corporate environment, I would use my last corporate role as an example, and a busy role with a lot of stakeholders, a great team who were all geographically sort of all over the place. But I knew that I had a lot of stakeholder engagement, which is code for lots of meetings, lots of project meetings, this, that and the other. But I knew that I needed a day on my own, away from the hustle and bustle of the workplace frankly, to do the administration. You've got to answer emails at some point. You've got to do your purchasing card receipts at some point. But I also knew I needed time to be able to think clearly and deeply and rationally about the work that I was doing and the outputs I needed to create. So I even though I had no caring responsibilities or anything like that, I would always work from home on a Friday, which I know some people went, oh, that's a bit weird. She's not a caring parent, as in I don't have caring responsibility, I do care. I live in the city. I live literally 700 metres from my workplace, but I needed to be in a place where I could be at my best. So Fridays I would work from home. Now I was available and what have you, but that was where I knew I could produce good work. In my own business now, and I've been operating for a couple of years, the same thing. I know I need days when I clear the decks and allow myself time to think. I create, I know my own rhythm, and I know that I'm an early bird, so I'm up at stupid o'clock sometimes, 5:30 in the mornings, and I get a lot of stuff done, probably before lots of the world wake up, but it's the administration stuff, so that I can be on and available and have FaceTime during the day with people who are at their best during the day. So even in a pure workplace context, that's kind of how I worked it. And for me, it took some time to work out when am I at my best, how am I at my best, and how do I manage that? Frankly, schedule it throughout the week. So that would be my first piece of advice. Work out how you work best.
Rituals are so important, aren't they? Like you said, that focus on planning and thinking in advance about what you've got on. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in this, I heard someone call the other day fractured work, all these little bits and pieces, checking emails, hundreds of emails a day, and not having that time, like you said, to have that deep creative thinking work. One of our ambassadors, Ian Maguire, for Flexible Working Day, he shared last year that he actually works from home as well on a Friday in an area where he has no technology, no access to Wi-Fi or anything. He lives down at the snow, the lucky bugger. But he said, it's actually not an excuse anymore to say you need technology for him, because he actually plans in advance and says, right, this is the type of work that I can get done on that day, which was a really interesting and different perspective, because it's the same for me. When I'm doing deep work, I often don't need technology.
Oh, absolutely not. And I'm the same. So I do a lot of research for my programs, and I'm fortunate when the weather's great, I can pack up my books and my papers and literally go without anything but my house key and the books and papers to the park at Flagstaff Gardens here and sit there and read them, because I am easily distracted. Nothing's changed since my school reports. Michelle is easily distracted. And if I hear the pling of my phone going, oh, there's a message, or a little icon saying there's some emails, I know that I'm drawn to those. And there's a lot of research about the instant gratification. So I was so hooked on social media, that instant gratification that plays around with our neurons and what have you. So to remove myself, so I think he's got a great strategy there to say, look, remove myself from temptation, as it were, and get that deep work done. So for me, and it was the same when I was doing my MBA. I knew I worked in blocks really well, so isolating myself with the help of my wife, who would banish me to my office in the house and say, get down there and do your reading and write your assignment, and literally turn off the Wi-Fi and everything. So I couldn't be tempted. So it's been really self-aware, I suppose. It's a really, really strong part of my strategy.
Beautiful. And like you said, sometimes it takes time. Look, no doubt you've had challenges in your journey, particularly working in corporates. So as you've come through the ranks, through manager to executive roles, I've no doubt that it's been hard. I know for myself, working in executive roles, there was always, people call it a multi-lane, a two-way street. Flexible working's a two-way street, whereas I call it more of a multi-lane highway, because you've got not just you and your manager, but you've got teams, you've got stakeholders, like you said, and there's all these factors always at play, and it's not always clear cut. What would your advice be, I suppose, to someone who wants to ask their manager for some flexibility, for something that may suit them, and not be confident in doing that? So I will go down the gender lens of women, what you do specialise working with, but keeping in mind that it is for everybody. Flexible work should be for everybody for any reason.
Yeah, no, look, and I think if I reflect on my own career, and you're right, and it's a really good point you made when you're an individual contributor, a manager, an executive, there are different expectations and certainly different barriers, particularly for women at those different levels. And some of them, particularly at individual contributor and manager level, could be, I don't really know what I'm entitled to. I don't know if the organisation has a flex work policy. So my first piece of advice is find out what the arrangements are. Now, I know some of the work I do with organisations is about connecting their policy with their frontline managers and doing that educational process, because writing a policy is one thing for an organisation, implementing it and getting everyone on board, particularly frontline managers, is another. So understand what the opportunity is from your organisation's perspective. If your organisation doesn't have a flex work policy, that does make it a tricky conversation, because you're a bit of a trailblazer, or you may be a bit of a trailblazer. But nothing beats a good conversation with your manager to say, this is what's going on for me work-wise, life-wise. I want to make it work. Here's a couple of suggestions about how it might make it work for me. How can it work for you as well? And that gives your manager the opportunity to consider a couple of options, understand that you're also, it isn't a one-way street. You're right, it is a multi-lane highway. And life is about trade-offs. As long as one party is not always trading off, I suppose that's the other thing. So, number one, understand what the policy and the framework is at your organisation. Number two, work out what you really want and how to articulate that so it works for you and for your employer. And then three, book in some time to have a conversation with the person who's the decision maker around it. Now, that's all well and good, but it's, that assumes that everyone's on the same page, we all get it, and we all understand the benefits of flex work. And it's not, I would be bananas if I sat here and said that you will be in flex working nirvana as a result of following that 3-step process. It's not always going to work that way. And we know, and I certainly know from the work I do with organisations, they are at varying levels of maturity around flex work and removing the barriers for greater female workforce participation and advancement. But, that's a very basic 3-step process. If the answer is no, or you don't get a satisfactory outcome from that conversation, then it's about saying, well, okay, what do I need to do here? And then it comes to the evaluation point. What do I need to do to make life work for myself, for my partner, for my family, etc., as well as having my career? And how am I going to go about getting that? If it's not with my current employer, I need to evaluate what choices I've got in front of me here. And for employers, I'd be saying that you would be naive not to think that women and men are making that evaluation about who they work for and how, because the era of my parents, where it was one job for life and you were loyal and the power sat with the employer, those days are long gone. And organisations who want to attract and develop and grow the best and the brightest talent now need to have these tools in their toolbox and be open and prepared and skilled to have the conversations around how do we create an environment that brings out the best in our people. So again, that's kind of a two looking at it from both an employer as well as a employee lens.
Absolutely. The study that we did last year found that 4 or 5 people will leave their employer if they are not given the flex that they, need to make their, like what you said, I like what you said around make their life work. Yeah. It's not about work-life balance, it's about making life work. And it's true.
And I just don't subscribe to work-life balance. I just, balance implies that there are 2 elements or 2 dimensions, and we are not 2-dimensional people. We are multifaceted, multi-dimensioned, complex people with similar lives. And, there are so many different factors at play, and every human has a different set of factors. But the reality is that for me, it's around harmony. And the example I use is, if you have an orchestra, you have lots and lots of different instruments in an orchestra. Some sometimes all of the instruments will be playing at once. So that conductor needs to work really hard, and you're the conductor. That's the tip. You're the conductor of your own orchestra. So you need to work really hard at making sure that each there's harmony going on. There'll be other times when there are certain, the pipe section will be dominant, and the pipe sections coming to the fore, or the flutes, or the drums, or whatever it may be. But life's like that. There will be times when family needs to take priority, and that it needs to come to the fore, and we're supporting around that. There are other times when work needs to be a priority. And I worked in business process outsourcing for a long time, and I've got to tell you, when there's a big tender due, it's all shoulders to the wheel, and lots of silly o'clock kind of hours and stuff. But as long as when it's all over, you can go back to normal or restore the harmony. That's the main thing. So I think it's like a marriage, give and take, and compromise, and work out that sometimes some things are going to be more dominant than others. But yeah, balance is a bit of a furphy, I think.
Absolutely. So what's been your biggest barrier if you look back in your career? So you've got adult children now, so it's been a long journey, and I know you say you can hardly remember when they were babies. But you look back and you say there was one real particular point in my life where the flexibility was difficult. What's something that you could share with people around how you navigated it? Because it's not always rainbows and butterflies like people portray. No. It can be quite challenging.
Yeah, look, I think I had roles that required me to travel a lot for a long, long time, and I can recall times when there was stuff going on at home, and I can remember a particular time when I was away from home. I was away for really not great reasons. I had to travel interstate to do some stuff for work that was pretty awful. And I get a phone call from my daughter that our little cat had died. And, all I wanted to do was be there with her, but I had to be where I was for work. And my partner, and my now wife, Rhonda, was there with her, which was great. But, that's the stuff that you go, gee whiz, I want to be there when the good stuff and the bad stuff happens. I also, I would say that there were some occasions when I probably wasn't around, and perhaps my kids would have liked me to have been around. But I suppose if I was going to give myself some advice now to my younger self, it would be to be a little bit more courageous and open with my workplace, to say, look, here's my life. I am the principal breadwinner. I have an amazing supportive partner. I have 2 children, and I need to make this work. How are we going to do this together? Because there are going to be times when I need to make them my priority. And I don't think I was courageous enough and open and transparent enough around what I needed, and that had consequences. So you learn from your mistakes, but I think I would have liked to have learned a bit quicker, because it's certainly, I would say there were times when my stress levels were pretty high about trying to have it all and do it all, and that has an impact on everyone around you, your colleagues, the people you lead, your family. So that would be my advice: is to have a little bit more courage and be a bit more open about what I needed. And the other thing was, I suppose it almost happened by accident, but I started to get very interested in, when my kids started playing sport, I started to get really interested in helping out and being a parent who could contribute from the sidelines. And I worked out then that life was more than just a job, and I'd had a lot of my own self-worth, confidence wrapped up in my status as an executive, as what I did for the 8, 10, 12 or so hours a day for 5 days a week. And I suddenly realised that, hey, there's actually more to contributing and making the world a good place than going to work for someone else. And that was a really strong learning curve. And that we talked about, I had a moment where I was coaching I think it was under 11 girls, netball girls, and we were at a training session, and I had my phone at my ear or my headset in, taking a conference call with a client as I'm getting 10-year-old girls running around doing drills, and I'm going, as I look back, I think that was probably my first example of working flexibly. I don't know if it was completely ideal, but it also meant that I thought, well, okay, this is the way to combine what I love to do work-wise, what I love to do in my personal time, and make a contribution. So, but again, I don't think I was transparent enough with all parties about what I was doing and why. And I think if I had have been, there would have been probably a little bit less pressure on me because I was plate spinning at that point.
Sounds like you were. Wow. And how'd the girls go in their game or their training?
I think they were completely oblivious. They were just, oh, yeah, Michelle's on the phone again, you know. Big deal.
Do what we're told.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good. And look, I think the thing that you said there, it's still alive and well, isn't it? That fear.
Yeah.
It's a fear of asking, I suppose, and respecting ourselves what we want, but also having that discussion. And like you said earlier around those, for people who, you know, if you don't have a workplace that has a culture of working flexibly and it's not normalised, it is very fearful to be able to go in and to have that discussion. I know my last executive role, before I started my own company, when I was doing my due diligence, you know, you get the call, you got the job, fantastic, send me through all the documents. I started reading them. They had no maternity leave policy, which that's a bit of a red flag. And so I had many discussions with my husband around, should I bring it up? You know, how stupid was that? Like, I am in my mid-30s saying, I don't know if I'm going to have a child or not, but, you know, it's something that should be an entitlement. Should I have a discussion? And I look back on that and I think, well, why didn't I have the confidence? I ended up doing it, but it took a bit of courage of me to say, and I almost wrote myself a script, and it was, I can't even believe I did this, but it was around, I've gone through all the policies, I see that you don't have maternity leave, I just need to tell you that I'm not pregnant. You know, why did I feel the need? If it was my husband going for a job, he wouldn't be saying, I need to tell you why my wife's not pregnant. But it's that, it's almost like that societal norm that we're being put up around.
And I think there's a couple of things in that whole scenario. And number one is we do place the burden on the excluded to be included a lot, Vanessa. And in your case, the burden was placed on you to call out that something was missing that you needed. So that's an issue that I feel quite strongly about, that how as business leaders can we create the environments where people can be comfortable calling out there's a gap, calling out this is not working for me, or calling out, do you realise that this might not work for our broader workforce, and how that translates? Yeah, and there are, as you know, more studies than I've had hot dinners around the upside of having an engaged workforce. You know, everything from 22 to 37% more profitable. So what does a fully engaged workforce means? It means a workplace that works for your workforce. So how, as business leaders, can we create the environments where people feel safe, psychologically safe to say, I need this for me to be the best version of myself for you in this organisation? And that's really incumbent on business leaders to examine, how can we create the environment where people can call out, challenge the status quo, ask for what they really need? Because you ask, you get loyalty, you get productivity, you get engagement. There's just this lovely virtuous circle that starts to emerge, and think, So I think you had to do all the heavy lifting in that example, and I would have liked the business to be going, how do we attract and retain and develop this high-flying person that clearly we want to be part of our organisation? So it's not food for thought.
Exactly. And look, they didn't have any flexible work policies. It was part-time, full-time. That was the policy. But I think, you know, once I got to that point where I said, you know what, it's exactly what you said around making life work for you. I had to leave at 2:30, 2 or 3 days every fortnight to pick up my children. So Dan and I share the caring responsibility of the older two. And that was at a point where, you know, you have to dig deep sometimes. I'm sure you had to do that in your career as well as an executive, to say, look, if I don't do it, how can I empower the people in my team to do it? And it was really interesting. It was a journey of about 12 months of doing that. And then people actually, it opened the door of people saying, you know, could I work from home on Friday? Or will it be okay if I get in at 9 o'clock?
Yep.
Absolutely. If that's how you work. And then it worked to a point where people were embracing it for their own, like you said, productivity, for that deep work and thinking, in the policy type of work that we were doing.
And it's so important to have those role models. You know, that the fact that you're an executive and visibly leaving at 2:30 to pick up your children, and everyone was aware of it, automatically gives people permission to consider, what does that mean to me and how can I make that work for me? And the two examples I'd give from my corporate days is, one was a woman I was mentoring, and she, in an organisation that had very publicly flex work policies, however, wasn't readily embraced by the division she was in. And she said, Michelle, I work in the city, I live in Geelong, I'm commuting. She was pregnant. And she said, you know, I've got to leave at 4:30, 2 days a week. And I went, okay. And now she's in at 7:30 in the morning, I've got to tell you. But she said that walk of shame when I leave my desk, I can't rid myself of it. Yeah. And I said, well, you know, this requires you having a conversation. She said, done that, manager's not on board, you know, this, that and the other. And so that was a really interesting environment, you know, her terminology, the walk of shame, picking up my staff. And we've all heard the stories of, in fact, I heard it again just a few weeks ago at a session I was moderating, men who are leaving their jackets on their chairs at work and the computer on and all that, to create the impression they're around somewhere. But what they've actually done is left to go pick up the kids or do whatever they need to do.
Have you not done it? I look back over my 20-year career, and I'm sure I've done that. And
I absolutely have.
As well.
But then the other story is more positive in a funny kind of way, is that I managed two really awesome men in one of my teams. And when I first became their people leader, both of them spoke to me and said, what's your position on flex work? And I said, why? Why do you ask? And they said, well, we're kind of interested in knowing because we'd like to work flexibly. And I said, well, we're in an organisation that openly, you know, has a policy, embraces. And they said, yeah, that's all well and good, but we've had work for managers who don't. And I said, look, here's my view. We're knowledge workers. We're not customer facing. We are all about the outcomes and the outputs that we create. You can sit in the middle of Burke Street on a tram all day and work if you want to, or you can work from the beach or whatever, as long as we're together once a month for our team meeting. But other than that, I trust you and you work the best way that it works for you. And, you know, I'll hold you accountable to produce what you need to produce. I'll create the environment that enables you to produce and give you the tools, including technology, etc. And your job is to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So that was all good. And then I said to both of them, what was the story about having that conversation with me? And they said, well, we kind of knew, having a female boss for the first time, that it was probably going to be okay to have the conversation.
About that.
Isn't that interesting? So having a female boss, and yes, and I was very open about the fact that I worked flexibly. And no, it wasn't about because I had caring responsibilities. I sit on 2 boards. I'm active in the community, sport, etc. And you know, that organisation had its 8 hours. They had their 1/3 of every day of me. That's what they paid me for. But then the 2/3 of the rest of the day was mine, and I needed to live my life in harmony. So I was very, very open about it. But so the message out of that, or the call to action, is yes, have the conversation. But business leaders, again, it's incumbent on us to role model the right behaviours, create psychologically safe environments for your workers to say, this is how work and life works for me. How do we make it all work together? And, look, let's face it, I think trust is also a big part. To have trust and be trusting and trustworthy is a really big part of it. And in low trust environments, this is going to be a difficult conversation. In high trust environments where we trust our people, we trust our leaders, I think that's and with trust goes accountability, but trust is a really big part of this. And I think we've got to examine if we're resistant, if an organisation or a manager or a person is resistant to flexible work, is it really a conversation about trust and why trust doesn't exist?
Mm. And it's very interesting. That's a lot of the work that I personally do around trust. And there's an intrinsic link between trust and bias.
Mm.
So the higher someone's bias, whether or not it's conscious or unconscious, usually their level of trust drops.
Absolutely.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But it does go back, I think, what you said there around the trustworthiness around us as individuals. So, sometimes things don't often work when we're working flexibly. Like I look at myself at the moment, I'm on a reduced, if you can call it hours or output in my own company, due to my daughter. She's incredibly unwell. So this Wednesday, for instance, she's in a hospital. And as a result, I've never worked part-time before in a professional capacity, but all of my deliverables and, like you said, my accountabilities, I still need to deliver, but it's in a less amount of time. And what that's really shown me is that, communication is essential, that prioritising, that ritualising, your planning, and being really clear with your stakeholders and clients around just what is going to happen and what's not going to happen. And the link to the trust is through those periods of time where, you're under different levels of pressure. For instance, where I'm at the moment, it's about that communication and to keep the trust with my clients, which I've got amazing clients. It's around me continuing to be reliable and to deliver and to really continue to provide them with the confidence that they are going to get what I say, what I tell them I'm going to deliver around that expectation. And I think people often forget that. They say, my manager doesn't trust me. And things do go wrong. Things do get forgotten, whether or not you work in the office, out of the office, full-time, part-time, job share, that's life. But it's around, I think, often us owning that. And being able, really open, but like you said, it is a Swiss cheese model as far as having a workplace that is safe, that you can have those conversations, but really being clear that it is sometimes challenging.
Yeah, and I think if you're a business leader who is who's struggling a bit to get on board with flex work, and maybe there is a trust issue. And look, let's face it, I've managed enough teams and people in my career to know that there are some people who can be a little bit naughty, but nothing beats a good conversation. But if you're one of those leaders, work out what works for you. So say, well, look, if you don't want to go all in, say, well, okay, I'm going to really jump on board here. Let's do a 90 or a 120-day trial, and let's put in place, what do I need to build my trust and belief in a system of flexible work in our environment. And that may mean that, okay, I have a stand-up huddle using whatever technology is available to us once a week. Or in my case, and not that I needed convincing, my last team I had when I was at the NAB, because we all had really challenging roles, we had lots of different stuff to do. I said, guys, I want 3 hours once a month face-to-face. That's it. The rest of the month, we all need to do what we've got to do, and we've all got that. And I think I had 12 people with 12 different sets of arrangements, and some of them were completely office-based because that was their preference. But that 3 hours once a month, and we agreed up front, it was sacrosanct. That was our time to look at each other face-to-face, connect as humans, work out where we all are, and frankly, make sure that things were still working for everyone. But outside of that, we had mechanisms, and I was really clear about the way I preferred to communicate and be communicated with as the team leader, and I was very conscious that some people need to see their leader more than others. And for those, and if I wasn't going to be able to meet those needs, how could we arrive at a compromise? So work out what works for you as a leader who's taking the journey for the first time. Say, well, let me have a growth mindset and say, let's see how we can make this work, and what do I need to do to overcome my bias and the things that challenge me around it. As a worker, also have some empathy for your boss to say, well, okay, I'm going to be out of sight, out of mind. What does that mean to that person? And if they're going on a bit of a journey, how can I help them help me? And that might mean I agree to do a half-page status report on a Friday afternoon. It could mean that we have a regular phone call on a Tuesday morning. Whatever it may be, to build that trust and that communication system between you and your manager. So again, it's a bit like a marriage. Lots of communication, a little bit of compromise, and lots of empathy. You know, these EQ traits are the stuff that set us apart from the machines. How do I have empathy and compassion for that person sitting opposite me, whether it's my boss or whether it's the person that reports to me? And let's try and work together on that.
Beautiful. Love it. Some wonderful tips there. And on the website, we've got a few more toolkits that are free that you can download if you want to have a discussion with your boss. We've got the flexibility kit that can help you. We've also got some tips to celebrate the day for HR professionals and managers and leaders. Michelle, before we go, we need to have a look at your shirt. What is on your shirt?
Oh dear. Okay. There you go.
Oh, very good. And
girls deserve to have fundamental rights.
You're changing history. Before we finish this wonderful webinar, can you share with us? So you're on this, you started your coaching career, how many years ago would that have been? Coaching the
so are we talking about football now?
Well, no, when did it all start? The 11-year-old netball girls.
Well, I played netball my whole life, and I stopped playing pretty much when I moved to Melbourne, and my daughter was about, I think we'd moved, it was about 2001 or 2, and anyway, we moved, and she had hit about 8 or 9, and just said, Mum, I want to play netball. I said, oh, sweet, because I love sport. So we did a bit of research, found our local netball association, joined a club, and Kelsey started playing, and of course, as a most interested onlooker, netball or any sporting club's pretty good at spotting those parents who show a lot of interest. Mm. They go, oh, would you like to be involved? I go, yeah, that'd be really great. So suddenly I was doing my umpiring course, and then they said, would you like to coach? I went, okay then, I'll coach. And then it was, would you like to join the committee? And then I found myself secretary of an incorporated association for 8 years. And so it started a journey, but it was probably one of the, you think about sort of peak or significant times in your life. That was when I really thought, I've got to do more than just work, because I discovered I just loved it, and also discovered I was quite good at sporting administration, and I worked out how to combine a few things, and it sort of one thing led to another, and here I am. I find myself on a board of a VFL club, and
and this weekend just gone.
So this weekend just gone. So the board I'm on is Williamstown Football Club, which is I think we're either the second or third oldest football club in Australia, and for the first time in 155 years, women ran on the ground on Saturday in the Williamstown colours. So we've put our first state level team, female team, our first female team, full stop, at state level on the ground, and an extraordinary moment. And I was saying to you earlier, I've got an article half written. I wrote down how I was feeling throughout the day, because it was a strange day, and that's going to be the name of my article. It was a really strange day. It was joyous and thought-provoking, what have you, but to watch, I'm getting goosebumps now.
I just got goosebumps myself.
Yeah, to watch history unfolding literally as 22 women ran past me onto a ground was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, and a lot of work by really great men and women to make that happen. So it's awesome. So who would have known that rocking up to a local netball club with an 8-year-old would have led. So, yeah.
Michelle, it's been a big year for you. So you've had that, then you got married to your lifelong love earlier this year.
Yeah. So I got married to Rhonda, my partner, and we've been together for nearly 18 years. And marriage had never been on the cards because we couldn't get married as a same-sex couple. And then last year, throughout the really horrible plebiscite period, once the plebiscite vote was read out and then same-sex marriage or marriage equality was legislated, we kind of went, okay, so this is now an option. And I was still umming and ahhing, and Rhonda said to me, you know, she knows, she's very clever, she knows how to get me. She said, okay, so do you remember those women that fought for your right to vote? And I said, yes, the suffragettes. She said, what would have happened if they'd done that and then you turned around and went, oh, look, I don't think I'll bother voting? I went, you've got a good point there. She said, there have been people fighting and giving their lives for decades and decades to allow you and I to marry. We don't have lots of role models in the LGBTI community. She said, we're going to do this. And I went, we so are. So we got married on the 25th of March. And that was amazing. It was amazing to stand in front of a whole bunch of people and say out loud what this other person means to you. It was amazing to be included in a part of society that we never ever thought we'd be included in. And it was joyous, absolutely joyous. And, you know, my internal and quite external warrior was in full flight. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's been such a big year. If you'd like to follow Michelle, her website is Advancing Women in Business and Sport. She's on every social media medium. She writes beautiful articles, shares videos. Follow her today and you can keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Happy Flexible Working Day.
Indeed. Happy Flex Day.
Bye.